So I just want to start off that this game is fantastic. I played about 60 hours of this game, never played Path of Exile 1. I just want to get into this game and see how good it is from the perspective of a person that doesn't have all this game time and knowledge when it comes to this series. I'm going to try to stay as balanced as possible. I hate it when a review just goes all negative because that's the easiest thing to dunk on. I think there's a ton of good in this game, but also a ton of bad. So I kind of want to stay balanced here. So the Tristram music, iconic, easily one of the best soundtracks of any game, period. Speaks to just how important it is to have that emotional connection with the encampment you're in. You're spending so much time there. Good music is incredibly important. And it has to be sessionable. I mean this in the best way possible. It needs to be like Goldfish. Hear me out. What I mean by that is Goldfish is great early, but it's not too overstimulating. It's not like a candy or something sweet. You can kill a whole bag of it, because you're going to be in these encampments for hours and hours on end, so it can't be a banger. It has to just be steadily good. It has to encapsulate the environment you're in, not only the tone of the game, but representing where you're at in the story and where you're at location-wise in the world that they're building. And I think he did a great job at doing all of this with this soundtrack. But where he saved the bangers for, though, is in the boss music. So just a few examples. I think my favorite music in the entire game is Against the Count. That music is awesome. And then also a close second is the Viper. I think that's my favorite boss encounter, but the music not on that Count level. But this is where the music really shines, in my opinion. It really encapsulates the intensity of those encounters. I would recommend just listening to them on your own, because when you're in the boss encounter, you're probably so focused on actually completing that you might not have appreciated it fully. I'd recommend giving it a shot. It's really good. So I look at Path of Exile 2 as basically two different games. You have the campaign and then you have maps. And maps feels like a massively different game comparatively. And I think that's some of the big flaws in Path of Exile 2 is that, and that's obviously something we're going to talk about later. Here's my favorite part of the game was those early acts. The game was firing on all cylinders for me when all aspects of the progression were all working as intended. So you have the skill gem, you have the support gems, your affixes on gear, crafting system, your passive skill tree. All of that early felt really good. There's so many different ways of progression. You always feel like you're hitting something. You're always kind of working towards something. It feels really good there. As a new player, I really liked having the simplicity of the game just kind of telling me, okay, you have or support gem level 1 and then simplifying it to just 3 options. Or when the skill gems come through, simplifying it to 4 options and you pick from there. As a new player, I really appreciated that. But one thing I didn't appreciate is that I felt like those limitations overstayed their welcome for me. As a new player, that happens later, so I don't want to skip ahead too far. I really wanted to focus on where I think Path of Exile shines is going to be when all of those systems are working and you're not limited on one, where it's like you can't even add more support gems, for example, or gears getting too rare. The trading system, you get bottlenecked on regal orbs. Like when you don't hit those bottlenecks, the game's amazing because you have so many different ways of progression, so many different ways of being able to get creative with your build. That's where I think the game's awesome. There's just a few roadblocks to that when it's good, and that's when the game starts to kind of hinder a bit. When you have all those systems working and all those different ways of progression, you basically have 3 questions as you're going through the campaign. Survivability, AoE damage, and then single target damage for bosses. And then having that whole dynamic, I thought was great. And I felt like the game tells you everything you need to know. You learn it all. It's not too difficult. The thing I'm looking forward to, and probably the best part, is going to be those boss encounters. And then the thing I really like on those boss encounters is when you die to them, loading screen's super quick, and you get to just immediately go out and try again. And you just get to just hammer it home until you finally get it, you finally beat them. And I think that is the most satisfying thing. Like a game, for example, in Elden Ring, that's known for this, and that's like basically one of the main gameplay loops of Elden Ring that I think they were trying to bring to Path of Exile, which I thought was an amazing idea. And I think they really nailed it in those early acts. The thing that really got me out of my flow state in those games is how long the delay is, where you're sitting there and you have to wait for the thing to say you died, and then wait to load in, and then walk back. It felt fair when I died, and then I got to just try again immediately. Such a rewarding feeling being able to put your build together and then beat the boss after learning the mechanics of it, and then there wasn't any annoying things that got in the way of that. And so that was like peak version of this game for me. That's like... Okay, so here's where the flaws come in for me. Gameplay systems that I really liked early start to fall off a bit. Some of the limitations that we had start to get a little too annoying. And then also some of them I think just need to get redesigned, especially around the end of Act 3-ish range, maybe end of Act 2-ish range into Cruel, I think this is where you start to see these issues. So the Regal Orb drop rate is terrible, and it means that you're basically just dealing with blue gear. And then for the most part for campaign, like, you know, to their credit, you can get through campaign with it. It's just annoying that it's like, I feel like I want to interact with their crafting system and really try it out. And then if you make Regal drops, the Regal Orbs so rare, then I never get to really interact with that system anymore, because I'm basically just praying for the two perfect affixes on my blue piece. And then I never get to try anything after that. And then when I do finally get a Regal Orb, I'm like nervous to use it because I might hit that next threshold for the next blue piece that that has a way better base anyway. So then you basically, like, from Act 2-ish, I want to say, just do not get to interact with the crafting system. And that was one of the things that I really liked about this game, especially coming from Diablo 4. This didn't even exist for me in Season 1 of Diablo 4, and I was like, wow, this is such a nice way to, like, add extra progression. And then they just kind of fumbled it, which was a bummer there. Then the other part of that progression system, that kind of core part of the game that I really enjoyed, was the skill gems. So the support gems, that was a big way of getting progression. And I was, in the beginning, I'd read all the support gems and I was super excited about all that. But then you get limited to just 2 spots, and then the materials to make it to 3 to 4 to 5 is insanely rare. So Editor Car here, I just want to be very clear that my issue is with the Jeweler's Orbs, not with the support gems themselves. It's just a bummer that it's so rare to be able to get Jeweler's Orbs to be able to actually increase the amount of sockets you have, so then you can actually make some more complex builds with your support gems. You're just going to be stuck at 2 to 3 sockets for a very long time. It's like there's 2 issues with that. Oh, I've lost another way of progression, so the only things I'm really looking forward to is like some crazy gear spike, which is a very low drop, and then also my passive skill tree, which there's not that much power into it. So then the dopamine is just missing. From there, you have the crafting system is completely neutered by the Regal Orbs. Then you don't have another way of dopamine and getting, like, I could be excited for a support gem, but then I can't even do anything with it, and it just sits there. So then now every time, like, the uncut skill gems used to be like something I was super excited for, either the support gems or just a brand new one. Then there's the other side of it. When I get through my whole crossbow, I was a mercenary, by the way, going through all that, then you lose out on a new skill to try. Like, I tried out every skill I possibly could. Out of all of these issues, that's the one that's fair, because you can only have so many skills. There's so much theory crafting and potential when it comes to the support gems that missing out on that was a big deal for me. That was a bummer that I had the support gems. I had the theory crafting in my mind, but then another currency gated me from being able to try that. Because that currency is so rare, it's kind of also, now I start to doubt myself. Now I start to go like, okay, do I really want to use it on this? I'm not sure. There's some potential buyer's remorse there because I know just how rare that currency is going to be. That was my gameplay mechanic issues. Now the actual progression loop, it's like through the actual game itself where they had a good balance of, like, you would clear out AoE mobs, you would try your build, you would go through, get certain drops, you have to interact with the campaign and do stuff, and then you get to a boss. What ends up happening is the maps get so crazy big that you have this massive gap between the AoE mobs and then the bosses, so then it just becomes so boring. First of all, just trekking through with no movement skills through this massive map, that in itself is boring. But then what happens is then, even if you tried some new thing to be able to go through the AoE side of your build, it just gets really stale, just mowing down the same boring enemies over and over and over again because the map's too damn big. And then you finally get to the boss. So then the parts of, like, the exciting parts are just too far in between and it's so self-inflicted. Like, they could just half the map size and it would be fine. And it would be, like, totally on pace and it'd be good. It's just such a bizarre choice that they made these maps absurdly big. It's just crazy. And the amount of times where I found where to go on, like, I had to clear the entire map and then find, like, one little section, like, oh, I missed here. And that's where I needed to go. Or I missed, like, down here. And I had to, like, comb through the map. Was absolutely infuriating, and it was a major buzzkill as I was going through campaign. Even though, like, this is the peak part of the game, and then even that part had a lot of issues. Cruel transition. What I really liked about the cruel transition was as a new player, it allowed me to see the progress I had in real time, basically, because I was able to test myself against the bosses again and see just all the stuff that I learned going through that, but then also to see the progress I made in just understanding the game and understanding my build, because I was able to see just how much better my build has gotten over time and be able to directly test it on those older bosses at a higher level. And I thought that was kind of interesting. After going through this, I think the compromise of getting a cruel version of Acts 1 through 3 and then getting maps instead of just getting a full campaign and no maps. I think that was the smart choice. I'm really glad that they did that. But then also I want to look at the cruel stuff from the perspective of, I think it's an unfair part of it to judge because obviously it was a compromise that they made. So I think it was pretty good. I think there's some silver linings to take from it. Yes, there's a lot of good you get to do twice, but all the bad gets doubled down on before you can finally get to maps. So that's something that is definitely, if you wait for early access to end, you won't have to deal with. If you're going to buy now for the $30, keep that in mind. Okay, so this section, going from campaign to maps, was definitely a wake-up call. And this is not really a critique or anything, especially about the early version of leaving Cruel, going to maps, because again, I don't want to harp on it too much because it might not be a natural progression going from Act 3 to mapping, as it would be when they finally finish the campaign. Like maybe the gear that you're going to be getting is going to be significantly better in the campaign going into maps. It will be smoother. I noticed that there was a massive difference between the damage I was doing at the end of Act 3 Cruel versus the mapping. It was like I was significantly less survivable. I was getting one shot. Like I remember I went to my first 2 maps and got one shot immediately. I was like, oh, okay, my gear, my build sucks. And then homebrew build, by the way, I know it sucks, but this is when it was like really noticeable. And then my damage felt like it went down quite a bit as well when I finally got to maps. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It was just something I noticed. And then that led me to trade. And I thought this was really cool. This is kind of another version of like my favorite gameplay loop in this game, or the core gameplay loop of like the dopamine hits through all the progression systems. So this adds a new progression system. And so I don't know if I could have gotten this progression system earlier. This is just when I found out about it. And I liked it a lot. But I can understand why people like to go solo self-found after a while playing this game, because the power difference I got in like an hour of trading exalts is crazy. Like I found so much stuff, and then I went from like doing no damage to just completely wiping the floor with tier 1, tier 2 maps like immediately with just a few exalt trades. But also like it was a pretty massive step up in power I needed. So it's like I kind of liked having this way of getting this power boost here with trade. That leads me to my actual critiques of the mapping system though. Okay, mapping currently needs a ton of reworking in my opinion. I think this is something that for me to really simplify it to the point that how I feel is that my favorite part of the game is getting to a boss and getting to try them over and over again until I finally beat that boss. It's challenging. I get to test my build, and then I get to finally overcome that challenge. I love that feeling. Mapping removes so much of it by, instead of being challenging, it's now punishing. And also what it does is changes the game entirely. I learned from this game that when I die, I go back to a checkpoint, and then if I get a checkpoint when I go to a boss, and then if I want to just sit there and grind against that boss, I can. And that's fun for me. I like doing that. But in maps, when I die, I don't go to a checkpoint. I just lose the map. I lose the currency. We're trying to snowball up on the currency there, where you would need progressively higher and higher currency. If I die, I might have to go back down. So it's like even more punishing there. And then I only get one chance against learning a potentially new mechanic on the boss, which for me, I like having those attempts to be able to do that. And I don't want to sit there and play like a pussy because I only get one chance, and then I get punished massively because it takes forever for me to get back to that. And then that doesn't even begin on the part that I haven't got to yet, which is like the pinnacle bosses and stuff, where you not only have one life, but you need to grind currency to get a shot at the boss, and then you can lose. When you lose that currency, and you got to grind the currency again, which I find absolutely absurd. It is the worst thing ever. So they took my favorite part of the game, and in my opinion, just completely removed it. It's just really tough for me to be excited about the game when it comes to mapping, because it's just crazy punishing. Like I want crazy challenging. I don't want crazy punishing. So to wrap this up, like I said in the beginning, I think this game is amazing. It is only going to get better in the future. It's just as the patches come rolling in, this game that's already really good is going to become great. Comparatively in this ARPG space, I think the only competition they really have is with Path of Exile 1, which really speaks to just how far ahead this company is when it comes to these particular games. I'm going to be going forward and trying to push higher tier maps with my mercenary and see how far I go. I want to give that a shot and really experience it for myself. A lot of the stuff currently in maps is kind of discouraging, but at the same time, I just want to really, just regardless of that, push and see how far I can go. If you made it this far, appreciate for you sticking around and hearing my thoughts on this game. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Peace.